What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into a friendly interview and suddenly finds himself under fire? What you're about to witness is one of the most intense confrontations in daytime television history, and it all started with a single unexpected question. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Bello host side, are you on? You're going to have a strong opinion by the end of this. Kevin Bacon settled onto the couch, that effortless smile lighting up his face's same presence that's made him a household name for over 4 decades. The audience applauded warmly. For the first few minutes, everything was smooth. Laughs, stories from set. Talk about his latest film classic, promotional interview energy. Then Joy Behar leaned forward, her eyes sharp, signaling that this was about to take a turn. "So, Kevin," she began, her tone measured but loaded. "A few months ago, you said actors should stay out of politics unless they really know what they're talking about. Did I get that right?" Bacon's smile remained polite, but a flicker of caution passed over his eyes. "Well, that's not exactly what I said," he replied carefully. "I was saying that all of you actors, politicians, anyone with a platform should be thoughtful about how we use our voice. I never said actors shouldn't speak up. I said we should be informed when we do." Joy's expression didn't soften. "But don't you think it's a little rich for someone who's benefited from Hollywood as much as you have to tell others to be informed? You've had the platform, the privilege, and now you're essentially telling others to stay quiet." The room shifted. The audience went from warm applause to uncertain murmurs. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Bacon straightened, his voice measured but firm. "I'm not telling anyone to be quiet. That's not what I said then, and it's not what I'm saying now. I'm talking about responsibility. When millions of people are listening, it's important to understand the complexities of the topics you discuss. That applies to me just as much as anyone else." Joy leaned forward. "Kevin, you do realize that sounds like gatekeeping activism, right? You're basically saying unless someone meets your standard, they shouldn't speak up about what matters to them. Don't you see the problem with that?" Bacon's calm intensity replaced his earlier charm. "No, Joy. What's problematic is putting words in my mouth and arguing against something I never said. I never said people shouldn't speak about what matters to them. I said we should be thoughtful and informed. There's a differentiation, you know it?" Gasps and applause rippled through the audience, divided but electrified. Another host tried to interject, but Joy held up her hand. "I'm not putting words in your mouth, Kevin. I'm interpreting what you say the way many people, myself included, heard it. Someone comfortable and successful telling others to check themselves before speaking." Bacon's jaw tightened. "Then maybe the problem isn't what I said. Maybe the problem is how determined some are to twist it into the worst possible interpretation. I've spent my career using whatever platform I have responsibly. I educate myself. I listen to people who know more. I support causes I believe in. I only suggested that others might consider doing the same. If that's controversial, then yes, I'm guilty." Joy crossed her arms, leaning back. "You know what I think, Kevin? I think you're uncomfortable because younger, more diverse voices are speaking up in ways that challenge your generation. And instead of examining your discomfort, you try to police how they express themselves." The silence that followed was deafening. Bacon held her gaze for a long moment, then spoke, quiet but razor sharp. "That is completely out of line. Joy, you don't know me well enough to assume what makes me uncomfortable. And it's insulting to suggest that my concern about informed discussion is rooted in discomfort with diversity. I've worked with, learned from, and supported people of every background. What you just said isn't just wrong, it's offensive." Joy didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to offend you, Kevin. I'm trying to show how your words might be received by those without your privilege or platform. What you say has impact. Bacon nodded slightly, eyes steady, his presence commanding the room. It sends a message. Bacon said, standing up not aggressively, but with unmistakable authority. And that message might not be the one you intended, but it's the one. People are hearing. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard. He fixed Joy with a steady gaze. You know what, Joy, I came here thinking we were going to have a conversation. An actual conversation where the people listen and try to understand different perspectives. But this isn't a conversation. You came in with your mind made up about what I think and what I meant before I even sat down. You're not interested in my perspective. You're interested in scoring points and making me look like something I'm not. One of the hosts tried to intervene. Kevin, let's just know. Joy cut in, standing her ground. Let him finish. He clearly has something to say. Bacon squared his shoulders. This right here is exactly the problem. Real discussions are dying because everyone is too busy trying to win. Trying to be right. Trying to take down anyone who doesn't perfectly align with their worldview. I came on this show in good faith, and you ambushed me with a bad faith reading of something I said months ago. And when I tried to clarify, you accused me of being uncomfortable with diversity. That's not discourse, Joy. That's a hit job. The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to hold its breath. Joy's expression hardened. A hit job, she shot back. Really, Kevin? Asking you to explain your own words, pointing out how they might be problematic. Maybe the real problem is you're not used to being challenged. You're used to nods and respect. And when someone pushes back, you can't handle it. Bacon's hands clenched at his sides. I can handle being challenged. What I cannot handle is being deliberately mischaracterized and insulted when I try to defend myself. You're not trying to understand me, Joy. You're trying to tear me down to feel righteous. And the saddest part, we probably agree on more than we disagree on, but we'll never know because you'd rather fight than talk. Joy stood now, facing him across the table. You want to know what's sad? Kevin, someone with your intelligence and experience can't see past your own ego to understand why people critique your words. You talk about responsibility, but you won't take responsibility for how your words land. You deflect. You play the victim. Bacon's voice rose for the first time. I'm not playing the victim. I'm defending myself against unfair accusations. There's a difference. And if you're so convinced you're right that you can't even consider I might be misunderstood, then this conversation is pointless. Maybe it is, Joy shot back, matching his intensity. Maybe we can't have a real conversation. Because one of us came here with an agenda. Bacon's jaw tightened. Yeah, one of us definitely did. The producers signaled for the break, and the tension snapped across the studio. The two stood frozen, locked in a stare that could have melted steel. The hosts looked mortified. The audience whispered in stunned fascination. Somewhere online, social media was already aflame. But Bacon and Behar weren't looking anywhere but at each other. When they returned, the atmosphere was electric. Kevin sat down, but the relaxed movie star energy was gone. His posture was taut, his focus razor sharp. Joy had that familiar look, eyes glinting, ready to strike, refusing to yield. Welcome back, Joy said, her voice tight, controlled. Kevin, before the break, you accused me of having an agenda. I think viewers deserve to hear what you meant. Bacon leaned forward, voice steady, cutting through the tension. What I meant, Joy, is that from the moment you brought up that interview, it was clear you weren't asking a genuine question. You weren't curious. You were setting up an argument. You had already decided what my words meant, what my motives were, and what kind of person I am. That's not journalism, Bacon said, voice steady but cutting. And it's not a conversation. It's ambush television. Joy's eyes flashed. Ambush television. Kevin, you're a guest on a talk show. You know how this works. We ask questions, sometimes tough questions, and guests answer. If you can't handle that, maybe press tours aren't for you. I can handle tough questions, Bacon replied, calm but firm. What I can't handle is dishonesty disguised as questioning. You're not trying to understand me. You're trying to discredit me, using tactics that shut down any real dialogue. One of the other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we could focus on the issue at hand. No, Joy interrupted sharply. This is the issue. Kevin's upset because I challenged him. And instead of engaging with the substance of what I'm saying, he attacks the way I'm saying it. Classic deflection. Bacon let out a humorless laugh. Deflection? Joy, you accused me of being uncomfortable with diversity, he implied. My entire perspective is rooted in some generational prejudice. When I called that offensive and unfair, you doubled down. How is that not deflection on your part? Joy shot back, leaning forward. You did. You went on record saying actors need to be careful about speaking on political issues. When I point out the implications, especially coming from someone in your position, you get defensive and claim I'm attacking you personally. Bacon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on hers. Do you want to know the actual implications of my statement, the ones you refuse to see? I was talking about responsibility. About the fact that when you have a platform, millions listen, whether you're qualified or not. I believe we owe it to them to do our homework, to understand the complexities, not just spout opinions without considering consequences. Joy pressed, her tone sharp. Who decides what counts as doing your homework? You, other established actors, the media? Because it seems like you're really saying, think twice before challenging the status quo. That's convenient for someone who benefits from it. Bacon's face flushed. That's not what I'm saying, and you know it. Stop twisting my words. I'm talking about intellectual honesty, about not spreading misinformation, about recognizing when you're out of your depth and listening to experts. And yes, I'm talking about how historically, marginalized communities have been told to stay quiet, wait their turn, get more educated before speaking out. Joy's voice rose, and now, when they finally have a platform, you're telling them to pump the brakes. Can you not see how that sounds? Bacon stood again, this time with real force. I never said anything about any specific community. I was speaking generally, including myself. You're the one injecting identity politics, twisting my call for informed discussion into an attack on diversity. That's your interpretation, not my intention. Joy stood to meet him, eyes locked. Intention doesn't matter when the impact is harmful. Kevin, your words have consequences whether you meant them that way or not. Bacon's gaze hardened. And that's exactly why it's so frustrating when people twist what I actually said to fit their narrative. I came here to talk about responsibility, not to be turned into a villain for pointing out that thoughtful, informed dialogue is necessary. That's all I'm asking for myself and for anyone else with a voice. The studio was tense. Even the audience, previously murmuring, fell silent. The line between debate and confrontation had vanished, leaving only raw, unfiltered confrontation and a conversation nobody would soon forget. And your accusations have consequences too. Bacon shot back, voice sharp. You just called me on national television someone who's uncomfortable with diversity and progress. Essentially, you labeled me a bigot without a shred of evidence, based entirely on your misreading of a statement I made about intellectual responsibility. Do you understand how serious that is? Do you understand what you're doing to my reputation right now? Joy's voice rose to match his intensity. We're talking about real harm here, telling people to stay in their lane, and you're worried about your reputation? is exactly the privilege I'm pointing out. It's not privilege to defend yourself against false accusations, Bacon said, a flicker of strain in his voice now. It's not privilege to expect to be treated fairly. And it's not privilege to ask people to actually listen to what you're saying instead of hearing what they want to hear. You decided who I am, what I believe, without giving me a fair hearing. The studio audience leaned in, some nodding, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The other hosts looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, but Bacon and Joy were locked in, neither willing to give an inch. Kevin, you're being held accountable for your actual words, Joy said firmly. Words you said publicly, on the record. Nobody's making anything up. And if you feel attacked, maybe it's because people without your advantages experience this every day when they try to speak up. Bacon's hand trembled slightly as he pointed at her. Do not presume to tell me what I've experienced. Do not reduce me to a demographic and weaponize that against me. I've worked my entire life. I've faced rejection, criticism, failure like everyone else. Success doesn't invalidate my perspective, and it doesn't make me fair game for sanctimony. A heavy silence followed. Achoo stared at him, expression unreadable. Then, quietly, cutting through the tension like a blade, Bacon said something that shifted the room. You know what's the saddest part of all this? His voice was low, precise. We probably agree on 90% of things. We probably want the same outcomes. We probably care about the same people. But we'll never find that out, because you'd rather win an argument than have a real conversation. And that is what's killing us as a society. Joy's expression flickered a mix of recognition and defensiveness. Easy for you to say when you're on the defensive. Kevin, it's easy to call for civility and understanding when you're the one being criticized. Is that really what you think this is about? Civility, Bacon asked, genuine confusion in his voice. No, I don't care about being nice. I care about being fair. I care about being understood. I care about not being publicly labeled something I'm not just because it fits someone else's narrative. That's not civility. That's basic honesty. One of the hosts finally tried to intervene. I think you're both coming at this from very different perspectives. Kevin, you're talking about responsibility and accuracy. Joy, you're talking about systemic issues and power dynamics. Maybe those aren't incompatible. Joy shook her head. They aren't compatible when one perspective is used to silence the other. When someone in Kevin's position says what he said, it chills people who are already hesitant to speak. That's the reality. Bacon leaned back, intensity still in his eyes. A chilling effect. I'm advocating for people to educate themselves before speaking on complex issues. How is that silencing? Encouraging responsibility and accuracy isn't oppression. Asking people to think before they speak is not the same as telling them to shut up. Joy leaned forward, voice sharp. It is the same for people who are already fighting to be heard. When you reinforce the message that they're not qualified, not credible, not experienced enough, your words do have a silencing effect intended. Or not. Bacon's voice dropped, intensity sharpening. Then maybe the problem isn't what I'm saying. Maybe the problem is that we've created an environment where any call for thoughtfulness is treated as an attack. Maybe we've become so afraid of being silenced that we've abandoned standards altogether. Joy leaned forward, eyes hard. Standards. Kevin, who sets those standards? Historically, the people setting the rules are the ones who've benefited from them. So forgive me if I'm skeptical when someone who's been inside the system for 4 years suddenly wants to lecture about standards, Joy said, voice tight. I'm not talking about gatekeeping. Bacon shot back, frustration clear in every syllable. I'm talking about truth, facts, not spreading conspiracy theories or misinformation, just because it feels right or suits your agenda. Those aren't arbitrary standards. joy. Those are the bare minimum for honest discourse. Joy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And who decides what's true? Kevin? Who decides what's fact and what's misinformation? Those judgments aren't neutral. They're made by people with their own biases, their own perspectives. Bacon stood, the studio falling into a tense hush. You want to know what I really think, Joy? His voice cut through the silence. You're so invested in this framework of oppressor and oppressed, of privileged and marginalized, that you've lost the ability to see individuals. You look at me, and all you see is a demographic. Someone to be called out, corrected, or lectured. But you don't see me. You don't see my beliefs, my values, my life. The audience was motionless. Joy's expression had hardened to stone. That's a very convenient speech, Kevin, she said, measured, cold, very moving. But it doesn't change the fact that you said what you said. People heard what they heard. No amount of flowery words about connection or understanding changes the impact of your original statement. Bacon's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his tone was steady, calm, cutting through the tension. Then we're at an impasse. I can't control how people choose to interpret my words, especially when those interpretations are filtered through assumptions. I can only control what I say and what I mean. I've been as clear as I can possibly be. Joy stood, facing him across the coffee table, voice firm.